We all agree tonight, all of the speakers have agreed that America has a very serious problem. Not only does America have a very serious problem, but our people have a very serious problem. America's problem is self-destruction. You're headed for self-destruction. Self-destruction. You're headed for self-destruction.
Welcome to Hood Disease. Thank you for tuning in. The epidemic of gun violence and its cure. I'm your host, OG Bruce Griggs. Thanks for tuning in to us. Today, we're going to be talking about treating gang culture as an illness. You know, the commandments of violence, or we call them the commandments of the hood, followed by those who often end up dead or in prison, make no sense to someone who wasn't brought up in this type of culture. You know, thou shalt carry a pistol for protection. Thou shalt not snitch. Thou shalt be down for thy homeboy, whether he's right or wrong. These are just a few of the notions that guide young people on the street. You know, this distorted way of thinking is viewed as a disease. It's sometimes called an addiction to incarceration and the death syndrome. That's what we've been teaching these kids. My name is Bruce Griggs. I'm the founder and executive director of Operation Correct Start Street Academy, and I am one of the facilitators of the Omega Violence Prevention Disease module. I did not come up with this module for hood disease, but I named it. So that's what we're going to be talking about today with hood disease. I've been doing this work for over 25 years, but about 10 years ago, I began hearing it described as a public health issue. The first time I heard it came from Dr. Petros Smith. She was the Dean of Public Health at Harvard. I was attending a conference, and she talked about it being a deadly consequence. Matter of fact, that was the name of her book. And then, as I told, I used to work into the jail, and I used to always talk to young people. And some of the young people that I worked with said it was like an illness. You know, I read also a book by a gang member out in Los Angeles. And the name of the book was called Uprising. And in Uprising, they talked about the gang lifestyle as having caught a disease when they were young and they couldn't get rid of it. You know, but the real first time I got a chance to put this into a module and see it work is when we went to this conference out in San Francisco, and they showed us this movie called Menace to Society. I don't know if everyone's seen this before, but Samuel Jackson's one of the lead characters in there. Everybody in the movie gets killed. And I can remember leaving the theater and saying, you know, how the hell does that happen? Everybody gets killed, you know? So what we started to do is rewind and take it back and see what type of risk factors could these people that were participating in this movie, what kind of things could they eliminate out of their lives to save them and keep them alive and free. Young people, not just young people, older adults also have developed it, but usually they get it through, just like any other disease, they get it through germs. And we teach that they get it through the germs of bad information, bad advice, bad example, and bad instruction. And none of these, you know, they look bad, especially in the movies. They don't look bad. They all look good and sound good. And usually it's presented by someone who's older or someone who's wiser, and who says that this is something that you got to do in order to survive, you know. But if he takes that person's advice, usually he stands a good chance of dying or going to prison. You know, for the kids who are very young and very, I guess they don't have a dad in their life. They got a lot of things going on. They don't have a positive adults around. It's easy for those bad things to start looking good to those kids. And then if you add in social media and the music, man, it's triply hard. Usually these images that these kids get through social media and the music and the videos, they're projected as fun and a way for them to be friends. But, you know, we use this metaphor of disease because ultimately it affects the rest of their well-being. You know, I was speaking in one of the prisons, and a guy started crying, and he said, you know, I went to prison for someone else. The violence commandment is, you know, I should be down for my homeboy, whether he's right or wrong. That fool believed in that. He was in there doing 25 to life for something that somebody else did. And, it's a shame because they don't get it and they don't know why that they act this way. It's a disease. All right. The way you treat the disease of violence is a 4-step treatment process. And the first thing you do is you deprogram the thinking. You got to change the way they think coming out the gate. That's the first and most important thing that you have to do. The second step is to eliminate the risk factors. Some of those risk factors being destructive language, cussing all the time, guns, alcohol, drugs, whether they're using or selling. We have to eliminate those risk factors. But there's one risk factor that we automatically can't do anything about, and that's the risk factor of growing up in an unhealthy family environment. There's nothing that can be done to change that. The third one is to deal with the emotional residue of anger, of fear, and of pain. And the fourth is to help them adopt some new rules to live by. Let's talk about the risk factors. One, I talked about, and I said there's almost nothing we can do. We don't have any control of. And that's them growing up in a destructive family environment. It's never right, but we don't have any kind of control over those things. The things we can control are drugs, guns, alcohol, their attitude, growing up being materialistic, putting everything over family values, seeing women as a commodity, and having friendship versus fearship. A lot of young people, they scare each other into being their friends instead of having relationships. A lot of those relationships are usually based on domination and control. I'm not your friend. I scared you into doing this. Usually their greatest obstacle at that age is peer pressure, So I give them a rule that helps them from the peer pressure. One that they always talk about in this new rule for living, and that is a friend will never lead you into danger. I'll say that again because this is one of the most important new rules that they learn, and that's a friend will never lead you into danger. So the filter for every relationship in your life should be danger. If they live by that rule, there's a good chance that love, family, or peer pressure will never be a problem. I also discovered that destructive language plays a big part of hood disease. When I was teaching school as a in-school suspension instructor, there was always one word that would start more fights than any other word that kids came out. Whenever someone called another one a bitch, that word, it took everything to another level. And I began to look at words and names that hurt and demean and make people feel like they have to retaliate. You call me a bitch, I got to do something to you. A lot of it, they consider it slang, but it's a risk factor. Thanks again for tuning in to Hood Disease, the podcast, the epidemic of gun violence and its cure. This was just a little teaser to tell you a little bit about what we're going to be talking about. Each and every week, we're going to have different subject matter that deals with eliminating this epidemic of gun violence that's attacking our community. We're going to talk this first week about violence, how it's likened to a disease. Then we'll talk about the germs of the disease of violence. We'll go into the transmission, the risk factors, the symptoms, the emotional residue. And finally, we'll tell you about what's the cure of the disease of violence. You make sure you tune in next week, same time, same channel. And remember, I am one. I am only one. I may not can do all things, but I can do some things. What I can do, I ought to do, and by the grace of God, I shall do. Until the next time.